Make sure you subscribe and also check out kongos.com/podcast for links and photos of all the stuff we're discussing.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of The Front Lounge with KONGOS. This podcast was sort of inspired by our discussions that we would have in the front lounge of our tour bus, and a lot of them happened at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 9 in the morning on a day off. And
I was never, ever up.
You were never up at 9 a.m., no. So basically, the front lounge is where everybody gathers. You know, after a show, it's kind of a social place. The coffee machine's there, the liquor's there, the beer's there. So we ended up talking about anything and everything, and that's where we got the idea for naming this show.
Okay, so breaking news. I wanted to talk about, because we listened to our first podcast we did, and I realized how weird all of our accents sound. So I wanted to talk about that. I think I might have the weirdest one, because I've spent the most time in the most different countries, you know.
I did notice that you actually have the most South African or British accent because you're the oldest and you kind of spent the most time there. But I noticed when you were talking about the garden, Dylan said tomatoes and you said tomatoes, and that just was not in keeping with the accent formula.
I think Johnny has the most English accent, the most South African accent, and the most American accent, depending on what subject he's talking about.
Yeah, I totally change how I talk with different people.
Remember when a South African friend of ours moved to the States, and we'd only met him a couple of times before that when he was in the States, and then we were driving around, and once he got familiar with us, he said, "Can I ask you guys some things? Do you like your accents? Because they're fucking terrible, hey?" And I've grown away from the South African accent. I don't really like it, or the Australian accent, or the British accent.
You still say South African like a South African.
Yeah,
like
I
most
say South African.
Americans say South African, like they enunciate all the syllables, but it's actually South African.
Well, yeah, the reason I think they're so weird is that 3 of us were born in London, then Danny's born in South Africa. We moved there at an early age. Our mom's American, grew up in Phoenix. Our dad's South African, but spent most of his adult life in the UK.
So pretty much we sound like Madonna.
I noticed I got in the Uber the other day, and sometimes if the Uber driver's chatty, eventually they say, you know, where are you from? What's your accent? And I told him, you know, an easy way to put it is it's half and half, and he really got a kick out of that. Normally that doesn't get a laugh, but he laughed like really loud.
He was hoping for 5-star rating.
Does it get a laugh?
What's the other one is basketball.
Basketball, yeah, that's a
basketball is one of the
in-word accent change. Yeah, all of these Southern Hemisphere accents. I think the reason you develop a like or a dislike is usually because you know somebody that you like or you dislike. Probably, I don't know. We're not objective. Americans like every accent. I don't really like any of those accents.
Part of the reason you start having a weird accent is because if you just talk in the accent you naturally have, people don't understand you in a lot of words.
Right, so you make some practical compromises. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like Mick, our tour manager, who's Scottish from Glasgow, and he ends up having to repeat himself 10 times because nobody understands what he's saying. So eventually he adjusts his words, and when we go back to Scotland to play, all his Scottish friends are like, geez, you sound American, and no one else in the world would think he sounds American. He still sounds Scottish as fuck.
His adjustment is still unintelligible.
We were out at Black Rabbit Rose seeing this jazz band here in LA, Mick and I, and there's another Scottish engineer there, and I've talked to him. His name is Frankie Fingers, and I can understand him and I can understand Mick perfectly. And then they were both drunk talking to each other, and it was just
another language, like Fifth Element or something.
It was just vowels mixed with occasional cymbal crashes. You know, it was like, "Well, come from you."
Well, they were Scottish, drunk, and talking about gear.
And reminiscing about people all with nicknames. Yeah, nobody had a normal name.
Yeah. Anyone else got breaking news?
No, I haven't. We should slow down these podcasts if you want me to have something to have done.
Come back to me in a year.
Yeah.
Well, You went to Vegas.
Yeah, I went to Vegas, as you all know. I talk to you every day. But we went, we had a merch guy that was out for about 6 months with us. He did part of the Kings of Leon tour and the One Republic tour with us. And while we were in Europe, in Estonia, he met his wife on Tinder. And I mean,
His now wife. And he got married this last weekend, exactly 3 years, literally date of the day they met on Tinder in Tallinn, Estonia. So he quit, needless to say.
Yeah, he quit the band and got a real job. Well, not quit the band, quit working for us and got a real job. He just was one of those guys that he was not cut out for the road, and he openly admits it. And he, like many of the people, we have a nickname for him, like most of the people that don't make it on the road, we call them things in relation to, like, because they're dead to us. So he is Muerto Matt, and we have
Dead to Us Derek.
Dead to Us Derek is one of Dylan's oldest friends from high school, and
Corpus Christi.
Corpus Christi, yeah. Well, so I mean,
yeah, some play on that. It was Corpus
Christi.
Yeah.
He didn't end up liking doing merch on the road for a living, but he got a wife out of it, so it's not all bad. I think that's a pretty good story right there.
It's pretty funny. Like KONGOS was featured in the wedding notes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because obviously not everyone knows how did you guys meet. So in the notes and that came with the wedding, it was Matt was out on tour with KONGOS and he was Tindering. So that's the reason I'm talking about this publicly, because it was in their vows, like that they met on Tinder. So
look
it's
at
totally
us!
open.
Look at us bringing people together, matchmakers.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the people that's gotten married on tour with us. I think there's going to be one or two more. We won't say who.
We'll see. My breaking news is that I've been cooking a lot. Normally on tour, you don't get to cook that much because you have to either eat out or there's catering or you order food or whatever. And I really miss cooking. And so since we've been off the road, I just every night cooking lots of Indian food, eggs and toast. I brought a pasta sauce over to the studio the other day. I think Danny and I were talking about it the other day. How somebody said that. Who did you say said that mixing a record is like cooking?
I can't remember his name. It's Phoenix's engineer. He's this very stereotypically French guy, and I was watching one of his mixing things.
Of course, he said it's like cooking.
Yeah, it didn't sound. Usually, you'd expect it to sound really goofy and pretentious, but it was so genuine coming from him. It is exactly like cooking. You add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some reverb, and then you have your dish.
Is he talking about French cooking? Because
he says I cook a lot, and for me it's the same.
Yeah, because if you're likening a mix to French cooking, then I would imagine it to be quite a sort of subtle mix.
It all turns out to be shit in the end.
Now, for me, a French Manu Chao. Some of those Frenchier, I guess he's Spanish and French, or what is he?
He's from all over the place. Yeah. If you read his bio, Manu Chao's from, I think it's part Portuguese, part French, part this and that. It's, if I would
it sounds like a Dutch oven type stew.
I would almost say that a Stevie Wonder record is kind of like Indian food, because the Stevie Wonder records, number one, they're mixed amazingly, and he was pretty involved with the mixing. But each element, like sometimes the hi-hat will just be so loud and off to one side, and I kind of liken that to Indian food, because you might just get a flavor that just smacks you in the face, but somehow it's still in balance with everything else.
Yeah, cardamom pod that you bite on.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm just imagining like pop records, like super corny pop records, or like McDonald's. The Doritos of mixing, like just turn up the flavor to 1,000%.
Mm-hmm. Everything is just salt and sweet.
And unsatisfying ultimately.
Yes, I think it's comparable.
I guess we could start talking about music only then.
Yeah. We had something we wanted to talk about. The link between music and math. Now, this is something that we kind of learned from an early age. It was just, to us, we just grew up with it. Our dads thought it was important for us to know the connection between music and math, and the relationships of vibrations and their frequencies and rhythm, and how math plays a part in that. So we kind of grew up talking about this stuff, but a lot of people just might not even connect the two. They think, music is art and math is science. But we would like to talk a little bit about how they are connected. Maybe Johnny, since he's the most astute in this area, could talk about it.
You guys just wrote this down as a topic to talk about, and then I've got to pretend to be a scientist.
I can save you. Just go watch that Disney thing, the Mathemagic.
Fantasia?
No, it's a Donald Duck.
Mathemagics.
Yeah, something
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's really good. It's funny, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was almost a concerted effort at one point, or there have been various times in history where there's been an effort to separate art from math, and to separate like the rational from the artistic, and to kind of draw an artificial line between the two. You know, if you look at certain periods in music history, there was almost like this rejection from everything I learned in like my little bit of music history classes, that there was the Romantic period. It was almost like a rejection of the Baroque period, which was, you know,
more scientific.
100 or so more years before it. Yeah, so they kind of wanted to reject that as an idea and make everything seem like it was just this
Emotional.
inspiration and emotion and all that. And obviously it is that, but it's neither one nor the other.
I think something a basic concept to wrap your head around the relationship is the octave. The octave is probably the most important element of music and of harmony and rhythm. So an octave is actually the relationship of 1 to 2. So if you play a C and then you play the C above that, the frequency is double. And if you slow that octave down and you play a beat that's got like a quarter note, for instance, that goes, the octave of that would be. And it seems like a kind of basic idea, but to me that says that there is a scientific undercurrent to all art, and it's either people are either aware of it or they're not. But you know, it's kind of interesting because people, anytime you get into a discussion, especially at a bar, you know, artists like to think it's some magic thing that's just pure inspiration. And if people understood the deep connection between science and art, it might not be such a debate.
Well, I think, look, most of the time, I think that people go whole hog down there. It's only inspiration thing is because you're trying to compensate for the fact that you've not studied the theory or something behind something. But it's not, you know, obviously neither side neither side rejects the other. Like there is an element that is mystical or magical about it. You know, we all know what it's like to be sitting there knocking your head against the wall trying to write a song, and then one moment happens and it all comes together. I think the end result, though, is that ultimately the music, when it takes its form as a vibration, is whether you want to call it that or not, is following the laws of mathematical and harmonic, it's resonance, basically.
Natural laws.
So there was this guy that we've all kind of dabbled in super lightly. His name was Joseph Schillinger. He was a Russian composer and more so a kind of teacher of composition. And he taught a lot of his students you would know or would be like Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller, George Gershwin. And we'll throw up some links on the website of specific things that he was known to have been kind of a teacher on. And he had a book that he wrote called The Mathematical Basis for the Arts. And what the brief summary from what my understanding of it is that he was trying to develop a system of theory that was based on actual mathematical theory and the understanding of the interrelation of vibrations rather than simply the observation of what composers had done in the past. So, I mean, like when you go to school, and what most of the school that all of us did, you went into a music theory class, it was like, oh, Bach did this, that's why we do this, which is not really theory, it's basically history. And now it turns out when Schillinger, through analysis of Bach in his system, discovered that the reason why Bach has become such a perennial composer and influence is because coincidentally or not, in the case of Bach probably, it lines up with a lot of a kind of mathematical approach to music.
Well, he was right at the crossroads of the way harmony had developed and trying to push it forward. Everybody's been trying to push forward harmony, you know, forever. Or I guess it depends on what you mean by forward, but you know, those fundamental problems he was struggling with, nobody really thinks about anymore, which is how to increase your chord repertoire on a single keyboard, and you'd have to compensate with tuning and all that kind of stuff. So he was. I guess you're talking more about his harmonic lines and the way.
No, well, yeah, but it's all definitely related. You know, there were in Western classical music. There's hundreds of years where literally they don't go from like the key of D minor to the key of whatever A flat major.
You don't play a sixth.
They're like, we can't get there. It was like a paradigm
what sounds wrong
shift.
to them. I think if anybody can hear something that sounds wrong to them. I was just playing some of that Pygmy music to a friend of mine, and she was just like, "No, this is not music. This is not." And I for me, it was kind of a weird experience to play for something which I thought was so cool, and so it felt very natural to me. And she was just like, "No, this is not good."
Well, I think that kind of my brain was going in a certain way with this idea that underlying all music and all art is some sort of mathematical laws. It leads to the question of how you listen to something. You know, do you knowing that? Do you listen to something and still think, "Oh, this is cool. This is not cool," you know, or do you try and listen in a way? The fact that this music is hitting you and it's acting on your ears and the organs in your body in a certain way and producing certain emotions. That it's a very interesting thing to think about listening to it in that context, or just like, oh, this reminds me of college, you know, in a more associative way. If you realize that the vibrations are acting on your apparatus, you can listen to music in a different way and not be so attached to your, you know, whatever current trends are attracting you.
Yeah, the problem is identifying what is your attachment. You know, there was a period where I couldn't listen to certain 80s music except for maybe Tears for Fears because I was opposed to the sounds, you know, and that went away. So but that's a kind of obvious attachment. So what are the more fundamental attachments? Like, how do you know that you're not listening with just your associations?
I think one nobody's perfect. You know, we all have our attachments. We all have our, like, this is cool, or this is fashionable music, or this is not, you know. But I think if you just have the idea when you listen to something new, I'm not going to, you know, this doesn't remind me of that, or this doesn't remind me of this. I'm going to listen in a way where you let the vibrations kind of fall on you and see what it does to your emotions.
I think we all have that problem of basically associative listening. I think the bigger problem is probably with negative associative listening. Like, if you have a positive association with some piece of music or some song, at least the potential of being open to the possibilities or the deeper potential of that music is there. Whereas if you have a kind of automatic negating of some type of music, then you've completely closed yourself off to any type of influence that music could have over you, or impression that could have on you, and how it might affect your emotions. I think we're probably pretty guilty of it as well, as being like completely turned off by certain types of music for our entire lives because of some arbitrary association, and now later in our lives we're coming back to it, like Danny says, no, 80s music is cool, or this is actually, there's some value in this type of music.
Country is kind of an easy one to pick because, you know, unless you're a country fan, most people are like, oh, I don't listen to country, I don't like it, you know? And it's because you associate it with a certain culture or whatever, and you're just not into that. But especially older country, I mean, you listen to that stuff, it's some good shit out there in it. And
I think, I mean...
Who's that comedian, again, who does that pandering song?
Bo Burnham.
Go look up Bo Burnham's country pandering.
Yeah, that's
we'll put a link to it because it's fucking hilarious. And country didn't used to be so shit, obviously. But
you see, I think if you're talking about how you listen to things, I think rhythm is perhaps the least associative element of music, because obviously lyrics, when you listen to lyric, you're actually dealing with concepts. So you're going to have associations. If you hear the word love, you're going to think, oh, she dumped me, or I love this person, or they don't love me. Then harmony even has more of a associative element to it, because you have more memories associated with that. Like sad moments in your life you might associate with sad songs, but I don't know if that necessarily proves that, you know, a minor chord is sad. But like there's certain rhythmic elements that, I mean, like, it's why EDM music it's like the most simple version of it, but it just seems that basic subdivision of an octave of like, speeding up of a kick drum, it literally just works. Like you can't help but feel excitement when that kind of moment
building
happens.
up to a drop or something.
It's like,
It's you're not thinking like, because you have all kinds of negative associations with EDM music. Probably half the people listening to this are going, I fucking hate EDM. But if you are in there and you're feeling the speaker, you feel a certain kind of energy that's like, okay, I'll move like this.
Yeah, but it still doesn't answer the question of whether that's associative or inherent.
I think if you look at a baby,
Yeah.
Babies don't yet have a whole bunch of baggage of what they associate what kind of music with in their memories. But you play a rhythmic track to a baby that's at least 9-10 months old, they're going to move. It's talking to their bodies.
Well, this is related to the Schillinger thing, but there was a guy in 2003 or 4. I'll look up his name. I think it's Gottfried or something. Gottfried. We'll put the link. But he made a link between pretty much every rhythm around the world except Indian music, which is more complicated, I think, and Euclidean geometry, which is finding like the largest common factor of two integers. And you can kind of visualize it. We'll put up some graphics so you can see it. But if you had a division of 12 and you wanted to spread 8 beats into that 12 grid as equally as possible, Euclidean geometry allows you to do that, to figure out how to most evenly distribute those 8 beats. And it pretty much explains every rhythm around the world.
Even complex kind of polyrhythms that you see in West Africa or whatever.
So if you had like a 16 grid and 4 and 2 going into that 16 grid, then you would get 4 on the floor with the snare drum on the next thing. But that's a very simple one. But you could do it with different integers too and explain lots of rhythms. So which is interesting that it's fundamentally rhythm, at least simplistic rhythm seems to be the relationship of 2 whole numbers.
Right. Now, you see, obviously people throughout...
It's exactly what I was going to say.
People have been approaching this idea because music obviously is so important to human beings for whatever reason. And to tie back to Schillinger and to the whole maybe beginning of this conversation is like everyone's been interested in trying to understand if there is a way to more often link the music you're creating with the effect you're trying to create. Because accidentally, sometimes you can write a happy song and it happens to click with people and think it's happy. But there has been this belief, and I think in our music we've had somewhat of an interest in saying like, well, I would like my people that listen to this music to feel this, that, or the other. How can I do that in the most kind of accurate way? Mm.
It's funny because I'm basically trying to do the opposite now on this next batch of songs and record because while I am very interested and I'm on board with the idea that there is science behind music and you can employ it, I don't think I'm scientific enough to use it really well. And sometimes if I just let my subconscious come out in something, it actually produces a better result than me trying to think about it and craft it.
I don't think any of us are personally. If we're like especially about this Euclidean stuff and Schillinger, I've read like 2 pages of Schillinger and then it got too complicated and I got bored and I went back on my iPhone. But it is sometimes like one of I'd never thought of swing as pushing towards a triplet. But then once I heard that concept, and now it actually helps.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a combination. Like obviously, you learn theory, you learn certain of these things, and then you, as a human being, are created with the same principles or evolved as the same principles. I don't mean to start a whole fucking religious debate between anybody. Either way, you have these mathematical principles within yourself of ratio, of balance, of harmony, and you react in a certain way. So perhaps what Jesse's saying is maybe the better route to it is being more in tune with your subconscious or with this quieter part of you that is where you don't have to be thinking, okay, this is a square and a triangle and how this turns into a rhythm. You know it and feel it within yourself automatically.
Yeah, I think we are like tuning forks. We ring out and we resonate with different things. And in the creative process, if you accept that you are a tuning fork and something comes into your mind, or you accidentally come across a chord on a piano and it just rings in your heart, then you trust that and you kind of go with it, because probably there's other people out there that are going to ring to the same chord.
Speaking of all this deep stuff, why don't we talk about music business? When we talk about the music business,
and if we butchered any of those concepts, anybody out there who's an actual like mathematician, we just
who's
message
not
us.
listening to this podcast.
Yeah. Just message us.
Yeah, set us straight. We're happy to be corrected.
We'll do a whole separate podcast every week called
Redactions.
Redactions and Corrections. So, music business. I mean,
this is like the polar opposite of that last discussion, the business side of music, which we love talking about just as much.
Yeah, one of the things. Let's talk about like sync licensing.
Yes, synchronizations. It means when your music is used specifically with something commercial. So either a commercial, a trailer, in a movie, in a TV show, that kind of thing. Anywhere where they're charging money, they got to pay you, theoretically.
With picture generally. So, in a movie, if you hear a song in a movie, that's called a synchronization. And that's, last week we talked about radio. If you found us on radio, the next most likely place that you would have found us, I would guess, is in some sort of TV show or commercial or whatever. I mean, Come With Me Now is just everywhere, and we thought maybe we'd discuss the way that stuff happens.
Well,
yeah, so I mean, the first sync we ever got, I think, wasn't on Escape. It was no. I mean, well, yeah. You're saying on Come With Me Now, but I think someone in Greece used Escape. Well, not Escape. Curious from the very first album. I feel like that. I don't know, maybe I'm making that up, but it's something like that happened.
No, well, I can't remember that. So let's just talk about Holy Motors.
Yes.
Whatever it was so minor that we don't remember. But
well, the real first thing where we became fully aware of the impact of it was Come With Me Now got a sync in one of the bowl games. That's when we realized
that was before Holy Motors?
No, it was after Holy Motors, but the impact from the bowl game was crazy. Do you remember it was for some college football championship or something in 2013 or something like that? And they synced the song and they used it in one of the commercials for the upcoming bowl game. And that week, because we were still doing everything independently, we'd already had Come With Me Now out for sale on iTunes, and we saw our sales go up to like 1,000. We sold 1,000 copies that week of Come With Me Now. We thought, holy shit. We just had never seen the most sales we'd seen in a week was like
one of these football games every week.
Yeah, I think our average sales were probably around like 70 singles a week.
What? There's like 70 singles total.
Yeah, it could be. I mean,
Somebody kept
I was trying to be optimistic.
Out of our iTunes, yeah.
So yeah, we've had some people always have ideas about syncs, about like, because it always brings up the idea of selling out. Like, you try and picture a band in the 70s, like Led Zeppelin or whatever, doing a commercial for a fast food restaurant. And that's obviously changed so much now that you're seeing bands doing it all the time.
It's still selling out. It's just accepted. I mean, there's no question that it's a compromised way to get your music out there, but we basically have to decide, is it better than not having it at all? And then there's the money.
Yeah, look,
we don't sell out unless you pay us really well. If you
It's
pay
not
us
selling
well,
out if you're not so precious about everything you do. I don't think Queen wrote "We Will Rock You" and "We Are the Champions" without thinking even just the tiniest amount that this song might be used for any type of celebration or bravado or pumping groups of people up. There's no way they wrote that and thought, this is going to be a quiet living room candlelit bath song.
So
Why is John Lennon? What did he say? Right, we're going to write a swimming pool.
Yeah, obviously, money is a big part of why people make music. Because if you can make money and make music, then you're living the dream.
Well, I think that what might interest people is, how this type of thing works is because we see this a lot. People come across our music from synchronization. They hear it on a TV show or commercial, and they always write to us or they comment on a Instagram post or something saying, I hope you guys got paid for this. And yes, someone got paid for it. The way basically the music business works, if you're in a major label contract or any kind of record label contract, is that they'll generally give you an advance to record your album. And whatever that amount is, you don't receive any more money from any type of music sales or anything of the sort until that money's been recouped. So if you're lucky enough to recoup, which is very rare these days, then every time a synchronization happens, you'll start making some portion of that money afterwards. But most cases, it just goes back towards paying the label back what they've advanced you and whatever they've spent on marketing and any other types of crap that they spend money on.
So why don't we talk a little bit? If you found us because of syncs, then you realize we've not turned many down, because Come With Me Now was probably everywhere, and it probably annoyed the shit out of a lot of people, and we're really not sorry about that. But we did have one or two that came to us where because we have to approve every usage, and there was one that came from a major fast food company. We won't say who, obviously, but the bottom line at the end of it, we kept saying no. We just thought it was really bad for our image. We didn't like the company. We didn't like the association. Like, nothing about it felt right for us. And you got to put this in the context that we've said yes to like almost everything else.
I think there was a Neutrogena shampoo commercial in Mexico that I think we said yes to.
Yeah, so we're not super precious artistes, if you get what my drift. But they kept just raising the number of what they wanted to pay us, and it was preposterous, and we still ended up saying no just because we thought long term it would have been bad for us.
I think for anyone who has that sort of hypothetical, we had the hypothetical discussion all the time before we were making money from music. We were like, would you do, if so and so offered you this for your song, would you take it? And it's kind of a fun hypothetical discussion to have. And then we were faced with a real dilemma, because I think we were in London at the time. We were opening up for One Republic, and our publisher called our manager and told him, like, guys, I got this amazing sync. It's huge. It's a lot of money. He was so excited about it. And once we kind of saw what the commercial was, what it was about, it was so
fucking shit.
It was just terrible. It was not good. Not a good look. It was
one of the cheesiest things I've ever seen in my life.
At the same time, it was not easy to say no to like a ton of money, basically, that could have, it could have paid for touring, so that we could go tour places that are too expensive. We could have used that money to something really cool.
It was one of the,
and that's what the devil kept saying to us.
But eventually,
turning it down was one of the best pleasures.
That was more fun than not getting the money. Was
just disappointing on people, on the business side of who we work with. Just intentionally disappointing them was just. It was a great feeling. It was cathartic.
Well, I remember we got a personal call from our publisher pleading with us to take it, saying you guys are making a mistake. Please just rethink this. You got to take this, and you got to understand we had never seen anything close to this amount of money for us for anything related to music, and but like Danny said, I've never felt more joy turning something down. Like, since then, we've gotten syncs that we did accept that were for the same amount or more, but none of them felt as good as turning that down.
Yeah,
and it wasn't a moral thing. Like, I don't think anyone's pretending to be morally objected to. No one was morally objecting to syncing their music with the company or whatever. It was just that this was so bad and cheesy, and we just couldn't, we couldn't bear to watch our song associated with it.
And then you saw it on a WWE commercial. So, yeah, I guess that kind of wraps it up. We're not sellouts until we are.
Like I say, I won't sell out unless you pay me.
Sell out, yeah.
Who's
Do you guys want to...
George Bernard Shaw? Someone says, if you don't like my principles, I've got other ones.
Groucho Marx.
Groucho.
Member berries.
Yeah, you guys want to talk about...
So if to recap the idea, this is where it's from, based on the South Park concept of entering a very nostalgic sort of, remember when, that type of thing. And so, should we talk about the Kings of Leon tour? Because that was like our first major tour. We were first of three. It was us, Young the Giant, and Kings of Leon. And it was so exciting to get that tour. We knew about it like 4 months before it was happening, and we couldn't tell anyone. We couldn't for like 2 months. We couldn't tell anybody because it hadn't announced yet. But it was so exciting, and then actually going on tour, you know, we have some of the best memories from that tour.
Yeah, I think, you know, we bumped into a couple of the guys from Young the Giant not too long ago, and we ended up just like sitting around going, member. Like it was such a easy when you're a support band for a band like Kings of Leon, like it's one of the easiest jobs in the world, because like all the pressure's on them. They got to sell the tickets. You kind of show up, play your half an hour, 45-minute set, and then you go out to the parking lot where your bus is and just have a party. So
well, yeah, we ran into Eric and Francois from Young the Giant, and we started reminiscing about the Kings of Leon tour because they had just played Red Rocks and sold it out. And Danny and I were
headliners.
As headliners, yeah. And Danny and I were congratulating them on it and saying, geez, like, how fucking crazy is it that a couple years ago you were opening there and now you've just sold out your own show there? And the first thing they said, and I don't know if they were saying this purely to like make us feel better, that, you know, it was just like boosting our ego, but I did believe them that they said, yeah, but really when we were there, like the only thing we could think about, not the only thing, but one of the things we were thinking about was how cool the Kings of Leon tour was, because essentially if you're the headliner and you're playing, not that we've ever been a headliner playing a venue that big, but I can imagine that is a ton of work, because we've played it on a much smaller scale, and when you're the headliner, there's so much pressure, there's so much extra work going into it, whereas if you're the opener, you're kind of just hanging out, playing your little 40-minute set, eating the great catering. And
I think, running through a day's work would be kind of a fun thing. So Kings of Leon had like a ton of buses. I think they had 8 or 9 buses for a band and all their crew. Young the Giant had 2 buses, and we had 1 bus, and we would all show up at these amphitheaters, and it was a summer tour, so it was mostly outdoor stuff. So in the morning, 9 a.m. or whatever, all the buses would roll up, and you know, halfway through, everyone kind of got to know each other. The Kings of Leon crew was super nice people. They kind of welcomed us and took care of us. So we wake up and go into the catering. The chefs that were traveling with the band with Kings of Leon were some of the best chefs I've ever witnessed. They had this amazing spread for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you just walk into the catering, same catering every day, different venue, but you see the same people, and I think they repeated a meal twice, like out of 30 dates or whatever. That means there was like 60 or 90 different meals that they made. And so you're hanging out with the crew and Young the Giant, eating, and then, you know, go for a run around the parking lot or work out, take a shower, eat lunch, talk to your friends.
It's like basically like a cruise ship.
Yeah,
where you have to do half an hour set every night.
Then you got to put your in-ears in and go play for 30 minutes, and then you go have a nice dinner, and then Kings of Leon were on a little bit of a different schedule. They would often take off or fly to the next gig or whatever. But then it was us and Young the Giant and the Kings of Leon crew, basically hanging out till bus call, drinking or eating the leftovers. I mean, it was. I've never been to summer camp, but I imagine that's what it feels like. There was one.
We'll probably have several of these member-berry things about that tour, but one of the ones that really sticks out in my memory is kind of early in that Kings of Leon tour. A lot of our crew was still kind of getting to know all the gear. Most of our crew are like our friends that not all of them started off as music business professionals or engineers or whatever. So they're learning as they go, as we're learning as we go. But our tour manager is super experienced, and it's the reason he's our tour manager. So one day on one of those Kings of Leon shows, everything went wrong on stage. And our tour manager was so pissed off with the rest of the guys, with Mo, stage manager, and like our guitar techs, that he made them unload all the gear from the trailer in the parking lot, set it up as though we were doing a show, and just like basically do drills, setting stuff up. And I
think this was after they started drinking too.
Yeah, they didn't know this was happening. They'd all like, oh, we'd packed the trailer, we're gonna have a beer. And Mick says to them, all right, guys, empty the trailer, set it up. We're doing this here in the parking lot. And they had to do it. And we obviously endorsed. We're like, yep, get him to work, Mick. And I just remember like everyone was in that parking lot, all the rest of the Kings of Leon crew and the Young the Giant guys, like skateboarding around, throwing balls and like frisbee. It's just like a silly little carnival scene, and our guys are there working.
It's the naughty boys in the corner that had to go to set up the gear. Well, yeah, to set the stage, I mean, that tour was so easy for everyone. Not that our crew doesn't work their asses off, on a regular basis on all the other tours, but this was, they were doing all the same things we were doing. They were kicking a soccer ball around, setting up the stage for half an hour, then, relaxing, and so Mick whipped them into shape.
It was not easy for the Kings of Leon crew, I'll tell you. Those guys, and, when we did our own sort of headline tours on a smaller scale, our crew worked so freaking hard, and we kind of learned a lot from that Kings of Leon crew, because they would load in at 8 or 9 a.m., and then they would tear down, probably be done by 1 or 1:30 a.m. in the morning, and then get on the buses and go do the same thing. So
yes. and
they
Mohawk
had
Mike.
8 semi-trucks full of gear.
Mohawk Mike was...
We called him Magic Mike.
Yeah, it's Magic Mike, yeah. Because he was, what was his position? Oh, he did motion, right? He moved all the lights. Like when the stage is that big, the light movement, if it's got pulleys and all that, has a specific engineer, and that's what he did. And he went on to actually work at SpaceX, but he used to lead these workouts. It felt a bit like a cult because they were too fucking hard. And I did one of them. Mo and I did one of them with him, and it was right before...
Mo skipped load-in the next day.
No, Nathan broke his ribs, so we skipped those shows for a couple weeks.
Oh, that's right. Mo was going to skip load-in the next day because his arms were hurting so bad.
Yeah, I just remember he literally couldn't move his arm up above
He was
his
drinking
shoulder.
Guinnesses with a straw.
I mean, there's one last memory I have from that specific night that Mick was having the guys set up to practice. Is Johnny and I took some of the most ridiculous accordion and big rig truck photos that have ever been taken. That's all I'm going to say. We'll post those up on the website, which maybe...
Johnny Marlowe.
Yeah, Johnny Marlowe, our photographer. KONGOS.com/podcast, by the way. We're going to be throwing up pictures of all the stuff we're talking about, so check that out while you're listening or after you listen.
Mm-hmm. All right. Favorite gear of the week?
Oh, favorite piece of gear of the week. We were going to talk about the Rupert Neve 542, the tape saturator emulator. So this is most of the gear we're talking about is probably going to be obscure, especially if you're not into engineering. But
involving a guy named Rupert.
Hopefully you can get as excited just from our tone talking about gear, because what this piece does is it kind of mimics the sound of old tape machines. Most recordings used to be done to tape, and then now in the digital world, it's done into a computer or whatever. But there's a certain sound that tape has. If you have a cassette player and you hear an old tape, or you recorded a mixtape too loud and you get that distortion, well, just imagine like a really, really nice version of that, a very high quality. That's what tape used to sound like. And a lot of people still do record to tape. Anyway, this box emulates that sound in an analog way. It's not a digital plug-in. And it sounds amazing. It's Rupert Neve is, one of the biggest names in gear and engineering. He's a British guy. He's sort of a mad genius. And you can select on it like the different speed. It emulates if the tape is at 15 IPS or 30 IPS, and it's got 2 different types of saturation that you can blend in. It's like it's very niche piece of gear, but I love it.
I seem to remember when we got this, Dad was in the studio, and you guys were showing it to him and explaining it to him, and like showing how it emulated this, and you can adjust the tape speed. He's like, "Yeah, I remember this when it was a tape machine," and I didn't have to emulate anything; I just had it.
Yeah, and I remember having to clean the tape heads every time, we were going to do another pass of recording.
Or bake tapes. You have to bake tape. If you leave your tapes sitting around, they'll get oxidized, and one of the ways to make them solid again is to put them in the oven at a low heat. So people putting their tape in the oven, cooking it.
The funny thing is, Dad still has just a 24-track Studer tape machine where we could have gotten the real thing, but we decided to buy a little
too
tiny
lazy.
box.
You got to press rewind and wait for it to rewind.
I have memories when we were kids. He would let us go down into the studio and just cut tape and splice it back together, like not actual tape. He would just give us leftover bits of tape to cut, and that was fun as a kid. But now when I think about doing that,
let's try the chorus there instead of after that verse.
Yeah,
4 hours later. Okay, it doesn't work.
What's crazy is we were watching the Metallica documentary, and Lars, he's kind of a perfectionist, partly because his rhythm is and his timing's not very good. But
it was.
It used to be very good. But anyway, so he was editing his drum tracks, and the engineer had to edit all his drum tracks on tape, and they were showing this guy edit his drum tracks. It was fucking insane. It's like you think it's difficult just to put, splice a verse here or chorus here. He was editing snare drum hits and fills and all sorts of things, and Lars was on him on like every bar.
Well, they had on whatever the song they were working on, they had 26 takes of drums. Lars had gridded out the sections into some sort of resolution. I don't know what the resolution was, and then he was like marking them all down. And you can see, if you had to do that, you'd be mad if people got your shit on LimeWire too.
So let me just ask you this. On Egomaniac, is there a specific thing you can remember using this tape saturator on where people might be able to kind of hear what you're talking about? We had it during that record, right?
Yeah, I think, maybe one thing that
Synths.
might be... Yeah, but I used it pretty subtly on most stuff. But one thing where I kind of drove it pretty hard maybe was the vocal on songs like Birds Do It or Autocorrect. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, I drove the vocals through it a little harder so you could actually hear the distortion as an effect. But, for the most part, I would use it now. It like fattens up the signal, your drums sound a little beefier, or that's the way I probably use it now going forward.
Yeah, it actually relates to harmonics again.
You see,
but
mixing is like cooking. If you use terms like beefier and, buttery, it's like...
Exactly.
yeah, vegetarian in life, fucking meat eaters in mixing.
Yeah. What's it like to be in a band with your brothers, guys?
It sucks.
Oh,
so remember last week we said we were going to talk about which lyrics of each other's we hate.
Oh shit! I forgot about this. I didn't prepare.
I didn't do my research. I don't know anyone else's lyrics.
Which songs did you write, Joe?
Why don't we start with "Come With Me" now?
Oh yeah, that one. I don't like it.
I wrote that one, and I don't particularly like a lot of it. It's always the second verse always felt awkward to me.
How does it go?
So what is this? A self-loathing segment? You're going to talk about your own lyrics? When
you meant to shit on our lyrics.
Oh yeah, don't worry. I'll get there. But I was just saying I do kind of agree on that one. When
First
it's funny.
album's Out of Bounds, by the way, because that was us finding our way, and let's just leave that one alone.
Yeah.
That was going to be one of my picks, and I don't know what to say now.
Here, just go around the circle. I'll pick one of... We're sitting in a circle. This is Johnny. I'm sitting next to Dylan. I'll pick one of Dylan's. Dylan pick one of Danny's, etc. One of Dylan's lyrics... I generally like a lot of Dylan's lyrics. Sex on the radio... Sex on the radio... So a lot of the verses, I'm not crazy about the verses of Sex on the Radio.
Fuck you!
Yeah, I never liked Idol TV show.
I was going to bring that line up. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't like the pun.
It wasn't intended to be a pun. At first, it was... I didn't even think of the Idol, like American Idol, because it was written probably when that show was just starting to become popular. It was written a long time before we even put it out, so it wasn't intended to be a pun. And then I remember you guys saying you didn't like it, and I was like, well, I'm just in 100 years, American Idol is going to be forgotten, and Sex on the Radio is going to be remembered.
All right, so Dylan, tell us about one of Danny's songs that is terrible.
You can include stuff that's not on the album, too.
I would have to look through the lyrics. There's not many of Danny's that I dislike. I think it's the association that I put towards some of all of your lyrics when I start singing them in my own head in my lounge singer voice. When I do that, I start to hate everyone's lyrics. Like,
what does that sound like?
Oh, kids these days. That's the, they don't have respect.
Can ruin any fucking song. He will ruin... Yeah. He's got a special skill.
It's a talent.
Yeah. I feel like I've got one version of that I do with yours. Factors of 9 reduced over time, chasing them prime. That you can do it.
I would love to have Richard Cheese. If you guys don't know who Richard Cheese is, just go search for him on YouTube
Let's
or Spotify.
not give them too many ideas. Let's not ruin the music for our fans. We can ruin it for ourselves because we play these songs, 300 times a year.
It would be an honor. I still think it would be an honor if Richard Cheese did a bad version of "Come With Me Now." All right, so Danny, what's one of Jesse's lyrics?
It may be easier to find one that you like.
I'm so bad at remembering lyrics, though. Especially, what was on the last record again?
I remember one that you kind of try to get me out of using.
What's that?
Is in I Want to Know, when it goes, always on the defense, always on the fence.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I still don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like that one either.
I can't stand that one.
Because it reminds you of the Ali G skit. That's the only reason why.
There's also a joke.
Talking about listening associatively, I couldn't hear that without picturing Ali G getting stuck in a loop.
That's weird because I like
Fins.
the "I Want to Know" lyrics of Jesse.
I like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember saying I was trying so hard to convince him. I was like, I like every other lyric. Just change this one.
All right, so Jesse already said he doesn't like "Come With Me Now." We can do another one if you want.
That was just a blanket statement, just to get a rise. But this is a hard one because I love the song, and objectively, I don't have a problem with the lyric. But just on this time, I won't forget when it says, "Oh, I'm alive. I'm taking my first breath." It took me a while to get behind that lyric because it just rubbed me the wrong way for some reason. I don't know why. But it's one of those things that I've kind of grown to accept, and now I like it, and it's part of the song. But, it's funny how lyrics kind of... Sometimes you don't know why you don't like it. Maybe it triggers some memory or something in your subconscious that...
Yeah, I remember us having a debate about that section, about those lyrics.
This sums up what it's actually like to be in a band with your brothers, because I can genuinely say that if I read any of your lyrics, and I'm not saying this as a compliment, from someone else, if someone else had signed their name underneath any of your lyrics, I would think, oh, that's a fucking good lyric. I want to listen to that. But the fact that you're my brothers, immediately I have all sorts of associations with what you're like in real life, and not just on a piece of paper, and what you act like, or if we just got in an argument or whatever, and then I go, this fucking guy,
Yeah.
He's trying to write something really profound and sincere. What a fucking douche.
Yeah.
Like if one of us wrote "I Am the Walrus," we immediately would have thrown that out from one of us. I think, because it's such a psychedelic, abstract lyric. We would have been like, "That, what the fuck are you talking about, Danny or Dylan or whatever?"
Yeah, that's probably the biggest...
But as a Beatles lyric, it's fucking, amazing.
Well, biggest
because we're not
difficulty-
convincing psychedelic characters
Yeah.
to ourselves. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
The biggest difficulty we have
What were you gonna say?
in a band as a band of brothers, is any amount of objectivity. I think it's basically... It requires a little bit of time and stepping away from it, like Jesse did. Now he likes "This Time I Won't Forget" because
I always liked the song. It was just some lyrics that I couldn't.
Even
get
the lyric.
behind.
Now it's been 10 years since that song was written or whatever, so he can accept it.
He still doesn't like "Come With Me Now."
That's going to take another eon.
All right, let's talk about something deep, some deep
I
thoughts.
feel like my lyrics got left out, so I'll volunteer the.
Oh, I had
that teacher
a
said
thought for your
sucks.
lyrics if you want. Any single lyric taken in isolation of yours, I think is good. But when you take all your songs, at least the ones that have been released, it's like, do you have any other fucking tone other than sarcasm?
But 2 in the morning is not.
Okay, I forgot about
2 in the morning
yeah.
is the one.
Or it's
I
the
haven't told you
biggest
guys,
troll.
but I wrote that sarcastically.
Yeah. Or it's a really, really good
Didn't
troll.
we when we first were playing songs from Egomaniac to people like in our business side of things, and they heard that, they said 2 in the morning is one of my favorite songs. And when they found out Danny wrote it, they couldn't believe it.
It's like, Danny fucking wrote that?
Which
He
is-
wrote a
yeah.
sensitive song? What,
And it's not that, like, we all know that he's capable of that because we've heard the songs, but I think people do think of you as like you're the sarcastic brother. I mean, but that's why we all actually found it hard to pick on one of your lyrics. We all like that sarcasm.
Yeah, if you've ever met us in a meet and greet, if you don't know our names but you know the lyrics, you'll probably be able to pick Danny out by his sarcasm.
Yeah, I'm the college douchebag who didn't go to college.
I used to have a teacher, a geometry teacher, and she would say, sarcasm is the mark of immaturity. And I really think
What?
yeah.
Was she kidding?
No, she was serious. She had no sense of humor. And I honestly think
She
she just didn't get it. Like,
Right.
she-
Literally, it's a sign of intelligence. sarcasm.
Yeah, well, I mean, scientifically speaking, that's definitely true.
But that's not doesn't. I think you. Yeah, she must have had her humor organ removed.
All right, so deep thoughts. I thought we could talk about this book that my girlfriend got me. It's called How Your Unconscious Mind Rules Your Behavior by Leonard Mlodinow.
True story. I think I had an Uber driver who recommended that book to me. I took a photo of it on my phone, and then I forgot about it.
He's sharing his car, so he's always Ubering to the studio. That's why he's got so many.
Got
I have
a
an
lot of
Uber driver stories. Yeah.
Anyway, so it's pretty fascinating. It's quite light reading. The content isn't light reading. Obviously, the experiments and discoveries that they're doing at that level are very deep, but the way it's presented for the layman is very
condensed.
Nice. Yeah, it's condensed. And so some of the experiments that they're doing are quite fascinating. There's one where they set up a grocery store aisle with the exact same type of wine. So one's a German wine, one's a French wine, but they're the exact same dryness, the exact same alcohol content, price, grape, on the same eye level on the shelf. And they alternate between days of playing German music and French music. And customers...
Fun days and dreary days.
And customers, on the days that they were playing French music, bought the French wine by a majority of like 70%, and then vice versa on the days that they played German music. And when asked afterwards if it had any influence on their purchase, most of them didn't even know or take note that the music was playing, let alone that it was French or German. So I just thought, and that's just one of the examples that it goes into in the book.
I like that. I mean, it makes sense, and I think we've discussed these kinds of ideas a lot before. This idea that you don't necessarily govern yourself fully. There's all kinds of subconscious stuff going on leading to your decisions, but I think that's auditory, stimulus that affects your decisions. I think another kind of strong one is smell, because I noticed that if you walk into a place, a lot of times you don't take note of the smell unless it's really something strong or different or outstanding, but it triggers memories so quickly. Like if you go to a mall, if I go to a mall and you walk past the Abercrombie smell and it's just this teenage cologne smell wafting out. For me, it just reminds me of being 13, and wearing cologne or deodorant. You just start doing that, and it reminds you of those times, and it just makes me want to go and buy those clothes. And
I had a whole cologne collection when I was 13.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
I thought you had one red one.
Oh no, I had 5 or 6.
Johnny was the most into fashion and cologne.
I remember I wanted that. I wanted your red cologne, but I just liked the bottle.
The one cologne I have, I forget what it was called, actually smelled nice. Didn't smell like cologne. It smelled like a weird spice mixture.
Well, that was
by the way.
A lot of colognes smell nice. Then you put them on a person.
Yeah.
You fucking don't want to smell that.
Speaking of smells, what about that casino we were at, all of us, lately? And we were walking around. It was the worst collection of smells I've ever smelled. You go into a casino, usually it smells like coconut or whatever, and you might not like it, but at least it's consistent. That we were walking around and I don't know, everything just was a bombardment of smells and sounds and everything, and it made you not want to stay there.
Well,
you went back to your room.
I mean, it's because they had different restaurants, and they had loud smoking, and you could smell the cleaning products. So you walk through the food court or whatever, and you've got Chinese food hitting you in the face, and pizza and Subway bread, and music. The music was overlapping from the different restaurants, so you had 3 different kinds of music hitting you in the face, and it was kind of debilitating. The just environment that it was.
Yeah, I remember just distinctly how those bombardment of smells and everything affected me that night. I love to play poker, and that constant bombardment of smells and sounds and everything just made me not want to do anything. I remember walking back from the poker. So, I ended up actually going and play poker, but
nothing worked.
On my way back, I was hungry and I wanted to get something to eat, but everything was just kind of turning me off, and I just ended up going back to my room and not wanting to do anything.
You went to bed without dinner?
Yeah.
But that actually was one of the interesting things in this book, is the effect of smell on people's choices in their purchases. Was one of the experiments was with stockings, where they were the exact same stockings, the same brand, color, everything identical, and one of them had a subtle smell on it, and the majority of people bought the ones with the smell on it. And when asked why they bought that particular one, they described everything about the stocking except for smell. They described how it stretched and the fabric, and that it seemed better made and everything else. And they not once did they mention that, you know.
So there's some kind of there's some kind of synesthesia, like light synesthesia, going on all the time with everybody. And some people have the extreme cases where they'll see a note as a color or whatever, but most people just have this blurry kind of everything influences everything about them.
Which is crazy to me when you look at the restaurants that like spend so much time and care getting every aspect of it right, from like the menu to what the staff's wearing, like, you know, the waiters and waitresses, what they're wearing, and the fucking everything's thought about, and they just put on some horrific playlist.
They need to take a page out of the retail industry's book, because they've got
It's
music.
like eating in an elevator.
They've got music figured out, the retail industry. They've done all kinds of studies on what tempo makes you buy stuff. So I think something like 100 and something BPM it's the tempo that makes you sort of nod your head. And so you're walking through a store and you look at some jeans and this music's making you nod your head, and now you associate that movement with an affirmative. Yes, I'm going to purchase this.
This is true, or you're just
No,
saying?
this is true. This is actually true.
Because I've forever said that.
Or like alternative music is just meant to make you buy something at Urban Outfitters. But I didn't know there was actual science to back me up.
Some
on
of
that.
it makes me want to buy stuff. It makes me want to buy earplugs.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, at the highest level, there are people very aware of these subtleties, and then at the lowest level, there are people that are completely unaware of it. Because I was at lunch one time with a big group of friends, and it was packed. It was 11 a.m., so technically it was brunch. But
he just didn't want to say that because, you know, we'd give him shit for going to brunch.
But there was a DJ, like an EDM DJ, playing at 11 a.m. in this place, and you could see the entire restaurant constantly looking up, trying to get someone's attention, basically with the look on their face was like, can someone tell this guy to shut the fuck up? We're trying to eat our blueberry pancakes.
Yeah, I want to eat my pesto eggs.
That's the Joe. Where were we? Well, I think it was a Joburg airport. Yeah, they were playing Marvin Gaye, and I was like, "Man, this airport's
Johannesburg,
cool."
South Africa.
Yeah, it felt like a cool movie scene. I was like, "Man, this airport's awesome. There's such a vibe. Everybody's going somewhere, getting home. Everybody seemed like they were smiling more." And then I realized they're playing Marvin Gaye, and not the typical shit that
I feel like that's such.
They just wanted to get it on.
That's such a cool potential to change, to think of something that you like is really clinical, whatever, a hospital or an airport or someplace, and put on a really fucking cool playlist. Like, imagine how it would change people's feeling when they go into a place like that. The DMV, play some fucking good music at the DMV. People would not hate it as much.
The opposite of that is true, though. If you think about, like, a lot of people now, Danny, you were telling me something about, like, someone you were talking to. Like, the idea of classical music now, they hate it. I forget who it was you were talking to, but what if you think about now, the only time you hear classical music, if you don't listen to classical music specifically, is like
you're taking a piss.
You're taking a piss in a bathroom in an airport or at a theater, a movie theater. So now,
on that Boston gig where we were staying, occasionally we get a fancy hotel room if the promoter is booking, if we're not, and so that was. Everybody's like, "Whoa, this hotel's kind of fancy." And you walk into your room, and it's just that kind of generic classical something that they pipe into the rooms.
Haydn or something.
Yeah,
Haydn.
It's I think what it is usually they've got like a clientele that wants to feel separate from the earth.
Yeah. I just felt so. I took a video actually because they had these like cool sort of mid-century looking radios. It was a wooden radio with cool silver knobs, and it was piping, like you said, generic classical music. And I walked in and I was like, "Where's that music?" Oh, that's in my room. They're playing that music. And I could just imagine what was going through their head. We want people to walk into our hotel rooms and feel sophisticated, take off their sport coat, throw it on the valet, and just, book room service.
There's something very funny.
What we did.
I felt so.
But you always get that anytime you do something that's sophisticated, you get that guilty feeling, which is just like, this is goofy. This is so.
Well, that's
goofy.
why I took a video, because for a second I thought, "Oh, this is a nice hotel room," and then I thought, "Wait, this music is influencing me. So I took a video, and I was picturing Wayne's World when he rolls down tells the guy in the Rolls Royce like the Grey Poupon ever. Excuse me, sir, do you have any Grey Poupon?
That's how you know if someone's full of shit, because if they can do too many of those types of sophisticated things without making fun of themselves in a row, that's when you know they're not to be trusted.
Yeah.
Like if you go to too many brunches and you do too many of those hotel experiences all in a row, not to be trusted.
Yeah. If they like smother their face with the wine glass and pretend like they're entering a new world.
That's just not my grade.
All right. Well, actually,
that's a good
I was going to say
story.
we should wrap up this podcast, but that story you got to tell.
Yeah, it's just suffice to say that I like wine. Most people like wine.
I'm not that crazy
Most
about
of us like it enough to say, "Oh, I like this one. Yeah, this one's drier. This one's fruitier. Whatever." I heard at a party this guy say, "Oh yeah, that's just not my grape."
This is our introduction to LA, though.
It stuck with me, yeah. So now I say it. I take a sip of it. Could be beer. That's just not my grape.
But just everyone needs to remember us talking about this and making fun of that guy, because we're going to do an episode, I'm sure, where we talk about Scotch, and we're going to be the most pretentious.
Yeah, but
snobby people.
I'll get pretentious as fuck
I was
about
cured
Scotch.
of that because I do have opinions about whiskey and stuff like that, and I like to have opinions. But when I can't remember which bar I was drunk at, but I thought I was drinking like a rye, and I was drinking. I didn't know what the fuck I was drinking, and that's when I gave up on having opinions about this kind of thing, because I realized you could have given me vodka and I wouldn't have known what I was drinking.
You can have an opinion about the first one, maybe two drinks. After that, your opinions get cut off.
Yeah, but blind testing is something everybody should do in every area of their life. Just in mixing, in food, in everything. Just what are you going to say?
I was going to say, just to finally wrap it up, that's another study in the book. How your unconscious rules your behavior is one of the wine studies where they gave two people, or they gave people the same wine, but they priced it differently. And everyone loves the expensive wine. And they can describe all sorts of things, and they can attribute all sorts of tastes and smells to the expensive wine, even though they were both the expensive wine, I think, from the same bottle. So.
This podcast is $99.
Right. I had some fucking brilliant thought, but I'll leave it for the next one.
All right, yeah. So that's our second episode. We're going to keep doing these. Keep tuning in. Make sure you hit subscribe on whatever you're listening to this on, Apple or Stitcher or Google Play. And find us at kongos.com/podcast to check out all the pictures and links from each episode that we're talking about. See you guys next week.
Podcast.
Podcast.
PODCAST. Kongos.com/podcast. All right, see you guys next week. Or talk to you guys next week.